Now it's time to meet tonight's guest. And he's in America. And he's going to tell us about MARS, Military Amateur Radio Service. But I'm not going to say any more because that's what he's here for tonight. So it's a real welcome to NARC Live to Dennis, N6KI. Dennis.
Good evening.
Good evening. Really good to see you.
It's an honor to be able to present this to you. And thank you, Roger Cook and David Palmer, for making this happen tonight.
Well, it's a really good story, and as I said, I don't want to spoil. I don't know anything about it except the bits that we've talked to when we talked at the rehearsal before. But I mean, it's a sort of serious story, but it's a wonderful story as well of how amateur radio helped people on the front line keep in touch, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. This, if not saved hundreds of, I think, amateurs' lives that wound up, like myself, in the Vietnam War, and it'll unravel. This story may be about me, but it's about hundreds of soldiers that were hams that wound up in Vietnam and got into the MARS, military affiliate radio system that was connecting the soldiers to their loved ones. And so, you know, this really goes very deep.
Sure. Well, I'm going to leave this presentation to you, but just to remind everybody at home, this is live, if you're watching this on Wednesday the 5th of October, and you can ask questions and make any comments or anything like that, share any experiences with us by entering it either on BATC or on Facebook at any time, and we'll read those comments and or questions to Dennis at the end. But now over to you, Dennis.
Okay, so what you're looking at here was a book that was published. I wrote an article for QST magazine back in 1990, and another friend who was also a soldier in Vietnam and had some affiliation with the MARS program decided to put a book together on the MARS system, mainly in Vietnam, and had everyone he could report in to QST and us to put them in a book of all the operators and the stations and all the data that we could connect with the MARS program. So let me see if I have some audio here. I guess not. There we go. Okay, so it is 1964. I'm a teenager in northern New Jersey. You see my station with a Hammerlin receiver and Johnson Viking transmitter on AM. And I decide I need an antenna. I don't have much money, and the cheapest and most effective antenna. And you may be wondering, what does this have to do with the presentation? Every slide I show will tie into the presentation very strategically. So I got together a few dollars from my paper route. I was a shoe shine boy on the boulevard, and I built this cubicle quad wire and bamboo spreader antenna, the most cheap and most effective antenna one could build in the 50s and 60s when you on a budget. And I had this beautiful 3-band antenna and a nice signal from northern New Jersey. I go off to college to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And after about 3 months of floundering around, because I was goofing off too much in high school and not knowing what direction I wanted to go, the things I wanted to take were too difficult. I did want to try to be an electrical engineer, but not passing all my physics, math, and chemistry did not help. So unfortunately, I dropped out of school. And the draft was very heavy at that time, and I tried to join the Air Force, and I tried to join the Navy, and I had a bad disc in my back, and they found out, and they wouldn't take me, and I said, good, I'm safe. No way. In September of 1967, I got a little notice from Uncle Sam, and all they cared about for the physical is, do these two fingers work? Because they key the only object of interest, which was an M16 at the time. I am drafted into the Army, and I say that because the Marines were drafting, and life was a little bit tougher there. So I was lucky that I didn't get drafted into the U.S. Marines. Okay, it's 1950s, and I'm a kid, and this is my hero, Dwight Eisenhower. Everything I can read and look at about World War II. And I just remember this photo in Life or Look, a magazine of Eisenhower reviewing the troops of the 101st Airborne Division. They're about to drop into Normandy on D-Day. And that was burned in my head. And I just remember every war movie I watched, you weren't anybody unless you had a Screaming Eagle 101st Airborne shoulder patch. I mean, these guys were my SEAL Team 6 when I was a kid. The 101st Airborne in Europe went all the way to Hitler's lair at Berchtesgaden, and there you see a picture of them. They own him. They've got his car, they got his beer, and they're celebrating the end of Hitler. Okay, so I do well in basic training. I'm a ham. I know Morse code. They make me an assistant instructor. Things are going well. I was offered, I had 3 semesters of, believe it or not, Air Force ROTC in college. And being that I had some college, I was offered to go to signal school to be a officer. And I turned it down because they would guarantee the school, but they wouldn't guarantee the job. And they were dropping second lieutenants in Vietnam like flies. You were always an infantry officer. Secondarily, I might be a signal officer. And I just wasn't taken well to that. So I decided to just take my chances. And I got radio school with the rest of my platoon. Nothing to do with it. I had a ham license. My whole platoon got it. If you did well in basic radio operator school, you were sent down to Fort Gordon, Georgia for radio teletype and top secret clearance and radio encryption. So I'm thinking I'm fairly safe. I'm not going to wind out in the bush with a rifle, I hoped. I had heard about the Mars program, connection between the military stations and the hams, and I had tried while I was at U.S. Facilities and forts to get into there. Maybe I could not go to Vietnam because just about everybody was going, but it just was not to happen. I just could not make it happen. So it was in the back of my mind. So here's one of the units I was trained on as a field as opposed to a comm center teletype operator. And for the old-timer hams that are listening, you might, let's see if this will play, recognize this sound. A model 15 or 19 or some similar nomenclature teletype machine. We operated out of vans, not in cushy comm centers. And we actually set our antennas up out in the field. So I was having fun. Here I am, a ham. Hey, I'm getting to play field day. You know, they give you the kit, they give you the instructions, you put up your antennas, and wow, this isn't so bad. Well, we graduate, 200 of us, from the school in Fort Gordon, and we're not given any specific orders. They said you will be given specific units when you get to Vietnam. Of the 200, 198 of us went to Vietnam. One fellow got Germany, one fellow got Italy. And it's funny, the guy that spoke Italian, do you think they send him to Italy? No, they send him to Germany. This is how the military does things. So we're sent to the 90th Replacement Battalion. It was called the 90th Repo Depot. Down there, Tan Son Nhut, the big air base near Saigon. And we await orders to specific units. And again, I'm thinking of Mars, that if there's any way I can do this. So, and I know that I've heard, you know, it's, again, soldiers, you could be just sitting in the field next to a radio, or you could be in a building, but these calls were going through, and I'm thinking I've got to try and get into this Mars system. So while I'm waiting for orders with my buddies, I contact the main Mars station in Vietnam for Army, which is Alpha Bravo 8 USA. Now these are now USA calls, you know, but back then Alpha calls and November calls were not being issued in 1967, just the W and the K calls. And I call and I said, hey, can you use a Mars operator? And they said, oh, yes. You're a ham? Yes. Well, there's a problem. So what's that? Well, we would have to know you were coming. It'll take 30 days to get you in here, and you'll be gone in a week or so. So sorry, do you know anybody really important? And I didn't, you know, like some general. So that was the end of that, my connection, and I kind of given up that, oh, well, that's that. What happens next could have been scripted, I swear, by Rod Serling.
Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so back at the 90th Replacement Battalion, all but 15 of us get orders for nice comm centers, what we would call a cushy rear echelon job, and there's 15 of us left, and they don't need any more radio teletype operators. So the next thing I know is I and my 14 other buddies, we are now shanghaied into the unit of my dreams, the 101st Airborne Division. Well, this is good, but this is a problem because we don't have the training that these guys have. And now I'm getting really worried. So not only do we go to the 101st Airborne Division, we go to one of the most prestigious and elite units of the 101st Airborne, the 506th Infantry, and I'll explain why in a minute. This Currahee was their motto. It's a Georgia, state of Georgia term for Indian tribe. It means we stand alone. Now, if you've watched the Band of Brothers movie, that was the 506th Infantry. The 506th, these guys, again, they went at D-Day, Operation Overlord, Market Garden, Netherlands, Battle of the Bulge, Boston, where the general, when the Germans had him surrounded, told him to surrender, he just said nuts and told them where to go. And of course, they went all the way to Hitler's lair in Berchtesgaden. They're featured in Easy Company in the movie Band of Brothers. In Saving Private Ryan, very popular movie, Private Ryan is in the 506th, the 101st Airborne. Saints and Soldiers, another movie, Tom Clancy's novel Without Remorse. And to this day, these kids, maybe some of the older people, playing games on their computers, Call of Duty, Company of Heroes, feature soldiers of the 506th. In my wildest dreams, I never thought I would wind up in the 101st and in one of their more elite units. So the 15 of us, we protest mightily that there's been a mistake. And the sergeant said, no, you're all infantry. You are now in the 101st Airborne. But Sergeant, we don't have that kind of training. You will have it. You're going to thank God that we're going to train you here in Vietnam for the combat. And you're actually don't have to untrain you for anything wrong or bad that you learned in the States. So we are sent to the Screaming Eagles Replacement Training School in Bien Hoa, Vietnam, again, down in the southern part of Vietnam. And for 2 or 3 weeks, we are being drilled by cadre that are going to make us, give us everything we know to survive and make us tougher and smarter. And anyway, my head is just spinning. We get weapons, special weapons training. We learn how to do ambushes. We're setting up claymores. We are now combat infantrymen. And, you know, the 101st Airborne, although noted for, you know, its jumps, was not jumping out of airplanes in Vietnam. It wasn't that kind of war. You could not really secure a landing zone. If what we were doing is you're going to jump, but you're going to jump out of a helicopter. And back to the present word, airborne. Okay, so of the 15, 11 of us are sent north up to where a lot of the heavy action is going on near the DMZ, to Fubai and Wei. And there's 4 of us left, and we're told to get on an aircraft, and we have no idea what's going to happen to us, exactly where we're going. They just tell you the minimum, the military. And next thing we know, we take off, and within less than an hour, we land at a remote runway. We are basically on the coast of the South China Sea, just south of a little Vietnamese town called Phan Thiet. And the name of the base there was Landing Zone Betty. Now, I drew this circle, and the circle shows that that is the nearest U.S. force that we can expect any help from if we're under attack. It is a 60-mile radius with Phan Rang to the north, where there was an air base, and Vung Tau to the south. And basically, that was it. When you were in trouble and you needed outside support, you learned what a 60-second minute was. Never mind 20 minutes to get an airstrike or some other support other than your helicopters, which don't just jump off the ground in an attack. They do take a little bit to get up in the air. So this shows the landing zone, and it's, again, bordered on cliffs 200 or 300 feet above the South China Sea. And we were glad we weren't at least on the DMZ or the Cambodian border. We would at least think, oh, we're only going to get attacked from 3 sides. No, they would actually come in boats, and the enemy would attack us from the water and mortar and shell us from boats. So you were never really safe. The buildings that you see in the background were left from when the French were there. And I don't know if there was an airport there before, but we definitely put this short runway in that could land certain planes that didn't need a lot of runway to take off and land. Anyway, basically you had a runway with the units all surrounding it. These little black dots around the periphery are bunkers, okay, that we would guard at night. We didn't have too much trouble during the day being attacked, because we could see people coming from miles, but at night it seemed like the enemy owned the night, and so you would be manning these bunkers at night. There were about 1,000 troops stationed here, 500 of which were with the 101st Airborne. The other 500 were support troops. So I and my 3 buddies are assigned to headquarters company, again, but with no specific orders of what we're going to do. And I am really worried. First, after the training that I had, I wrote a letter home that I really didn't think I was going to survive as a combat infantryman. I just told my parents just to be prepared for the worst. And I thought I would, I am in the unit of my dreams, my lifetime, but what is it I can do for them and not get myself killed or my buddies? And I didn't think being a combat infantryman was going to be it. And I said, I have got to find a radio to operate is what I have to do, because that would be the penultimate job for me. That is what I do. It's what I know. So we fall out every day. If you don't have specific job or orders in front of the headquarters building, and they'll come and issue you your orders at that time in your assignment. And I asked someone, I said, well, how long does this take? They said, well, this could take a week probably before you'll actually get some orders cut, usually not less. And I decide after they don't call my name, they just put you on duty around the base camp. You're building bunkers, digging defensive positions, you're doing all kinds of tasks, and filling sandbags, and just to keep you busy. And I say, well, wait a minute, they don't come but every morning and look for you. No one takes your name until the time they come and get you just for the daily duty. So I decide one morning to walk off, go what they call AWOL, and I risk, being busted, and thinking, well, they won't come and look for me during the day. I'm going to go look and see if I can find a radio to operate, because this, I feel, is going to possibly save my life if this happens. So I go walking around the LZ, the base camp, and touring it on my own, and I'm looking for a radio to operate. I'm looking for antennas and a radio. The radio I would love to operate was this single sideband radio. Probably cost about $10,000, 10 times that much now. And the best one the military had, and if I could find that, I know I could do well for my unit. I did not want to find this radio. This radio winds up right there. And out in the bush with that radio on your back, guess who the enemy knows who you are? And in an ambush gone bad, I used to think you had a 7-second life expectancy under an attack gone bad. I was wrong. From what I read from Wikipedia, it was 3 to 5 seconds. The enemy was known to take you out, and the soldier behind you, who was either the platoon sergeant or the lieutenant, that was ready to grab the mic on the radio. So I go walking around the base camp, and I spend the day looking for antennas. Now, by the way, in the background, you'll see how close the enemy was. That's our bunker right there, one of the many bunkers around there. So at night, this was all enemy territory that we would be attacked from. Anyway, I'd find an antenna, I'd find the coax, I'd follow it down into a building, and I would go ask, hey, do you need a radio operator? Desperate, but you do desperate measures in desperate times. I am looking for any type. I don't care how weird, what contraption, any antenna. And I finally walk into a compound, which was normally a secure compound with high chain link fence around that. For some reason, the gate was open. Like I said, during the day, things relaxed, but at night, it was a different story. And I spot this microwave dish in a facility, and I start walking around this compound looking, where do the coaxes go? And I spot this shipping container, a 6-foot cube that's sandbagged by bunkers. And hey, look what's up above there. Gee, do I recognize that antenna? I said, wait a minute, the military does not use these type of antennas. What could that be? I go up to the front of the bunker, I track the coax downward, and I pop my head in the little entrance of this bunker. And before I even enter, I hear this sound. That is the sound of single sideband. I stick my head in the bunker, and there is the most beautiful sight a young ham operator could ever see. This is all Collins, the best radio equipment in the world. That would be like giving a 20-year-old kid a Mustang GT 500 Shelby car. And I go, my God, could this be? I see the KWM2A transceiver. I see this 500 watt 30L1 linear. There's a speaker power supply. But what I see that really gets my heart pounding is I see the word phone patch on the front of this unit. And I'm going, could this be? I leave the bunker, I turn to my right, I see a building built out of old ammo crates and tin roof, and I hear some music playing in the background. I stick my head in the doorway, and it's a partial bunkhouse and bar for the troops stationed in this compound. There's two soldiers sitting in there. I startled them, and they said, what are you doing here? I said, hey, what's the deal on this bunker next door? And they said, oh, if you want to call home, you contact us or come back at 3 o'clock. I said, no, I don't want to. Is this a Mars station? They said, how do you know that? I said, well, the antenna, the equipment. They said, yeah. And what do you want? Well, I want to be an operator. Well, yeah, but you're not in our unit. We're a different Army unit. We can't just have you come over here, but you come back. later today at 3 o'clock, and this fellow, Pat Yunker, sergeant, he's running that. He does his duties from like 6 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m., and then the rest of the day he runs these calls through where they have contact with the states from 3 p.m. in the afternoon till about 3 in the morning. So I contact Pat Yunker, and he says, hey, good timing. He says, I've got 30 days, I'm leaving, there's no one to run this radio station, but we have a problem. You're not in my unit, and you're not going to get transferred to my unit, but let me send you to another fellow that between him and I, maybe we can help you out. He sends me to talk to a civilian, and that's a civilian contractor that's actually working on the base. But let me get back to this little out of sequence. When Pat was putting these calls through, they didn't have phone lines running all over the base camp, only to major facilities on the base camp. So the average soldier had to come into the bunker and stand next to Pat or sit next to him, and Pat would jam a microphone in their face. You imagine if you had mic fright, and this was your no privacy phone patch to your loved ones. Also, there's danger. This was a few months before, when the ammunition dump across the road had blown up, when the enemies had mortared and rocketed the base, and the living quarters were blown apart, and the antenna was also blown apart a little bit here, and the buildings that were there were crushed like soda cans from the rounds going off. Anyway, I was told to go and talk to a fellow named Jack winning like winning a game, who again was a civilian liaison to bring supplies into the base camp, and he was a WA6 WDB ham, and he was the main support for the Mars station. The Army's support of this Mars program was very limited and not well organized, and a lot of times there weren't funds if your radios broke or if you needed supplies to even get them. So we were really depending a lot on the hams back in the United States, and some money that was poorly allocated to the Mars program in Vietnam. So since Jack, civilian, lived and hobnobbed with the officers, Jack went and said, okay, let me go talk to your commanding officer and see if I can get you into this Mars job. And that's exactly what Jack did. By the way, when the stuff hit the fan, as they say, even Jack had to get up on the line, and here he is out here on the range during the day. Everybody had to defend, including the civilians, the landing zone. So Jack does his magic. He sends Pat Yunker over to my sergeant major. Also talks to the colonel. I heard I got traded, mainly the sergeant major, for a bottle of Chivas Regal. And the kind of bartering you did in the Army, for 30 days only, though. I'm on temporary duty. We'll see what happens from there. And my platoon sergeant is absolutely enraged. He's so mad and threatens that on the 31st day, he is going to stick me in the field with the radio on my back, and I will be back as a combat infantry soldier. So I knew that I had my work cut out for me to try and stay in the Mars station. And the story goes on that I managed to do this. So the Mars program had Air Force Mars, Navy Marine Mars, Army Mars. The stations, all the Army Mars stations had Alpha Bravo 8 prefix call signs. The Air Force for Alpha Indy 8, and the Navy had N letter N call signs. At this time, when this was taken, there were 42 of these service Mars stations scattered around with all the major bases in Vietnam. We had a network set up where we'd have a net control station in the middle of the hub, our command and control station in the center being the station I called when I first came in country. And then the individual net control stations. For mine, Alpha Bravo 8, Alpha Victor, down south of me, 60 miles in Vung Tau. And there were either 5 or 6 other of us stations in the net. My call letter in my station was Alpha Bravo 8, Alpha Yankee. And we would have to share frequencies to run these phone patches. Basically, we had, I was in net number 5. We had stations just above and below the ham bands. We mainly used 15 meters during the day, starting around 3 p.m. And then when 15 went out, we went over to 20 meter band. And again, we were just above and below. As you can see, the frequencies, like here's 14.40 for 20 meters. And let's see, my 15 meter is somewhere, if not on this list. Oh, maybe that was allocated later, but we were somewhere above and below. Oh, here it is, 20.104. Okay, these are the stations that were in our network. I'm here up at Fanthiette. My net controls at Vung Tau. We had 3 stations down in the Delta, and we had 1 station that was actually on a Navy ship that was manned by Army personnel out off the coast of Vung Tau. And the one problem was that me being the only operator, you were supposed to keep these Mars stations on 24 hours a day and check with net control whether you had stateside contact or not every hour. Well, there's no way I could do that because I had to sleep sometime. But luckily, the net control station in Vung Tau, knowing my predicament, would cover for me and pretend I was checking in when I really wasn't even on the air during the time when I was sleeping. Now, serendipitously, this is your sunspots during the time of the Vietnam War from 1964 to 1973 that the U.S. troops were there. And here I am, it's now middle of 1968, and I served 12 months till middle of 1969. You notice the numbers are the highest. Well, the higher sunspots, just like now, the better the propagation, more foam patches that you were able to make to the States. Some of the operators from the States that worked with my station, Bob and Jane Purcell, W6RGM, really good martini, and K6RGM in Yucca Valley, California. Gerard and Carlotta Bonget. Carlotta was actually the radio operator, and Gerard was just there for support, and ran that station out of Tucson. Gerard, by the way, was a teenager during World War II and fought with the French resistance. He was living in Paris at the time. Okay, so let's look at what some of these Mars stations look like. The main command and control station for Vietnam down there, Saigon, AB-8 USA. Beautiful, nice air-conditioned room, clocks telling you what time it was all over the world. The larger Collins 2,000 watt amplifier and the individual receivers and transmitters. They also did teletype. Had I gotten in here, I would have been an asset because these are R390 receivers, and they did send Mars grams. So if you couldn't get a phone call through, they would send a telegram instead. And that would have been perfect for me, but I did not get into that station. They were located down in near the R&R Center in Vietnam, which where you went for your R&R for in country. Their station was set up using like a truck trailer, and being at, again, catch can on supplies and things. They're using a construction scaffolding for their tower. The antenna happens to be a ham beam that's been high gain that's been modified to go on the Mars frequencies. There was also, they were lucky enough to have a calling booth next door, which afforded you some privacy, and also because at night there would be explosions going on in the background of most of these base camps. It would keep that from getting into the phone lines and scaring the heck out of the people you were talking to. They even had power, which I did not have, to power an air conditioner to try and keep mainly the equipment, not you, cool. As you can imagine, it generated a lot of heat. One of the other stations where you can see they have a large log periodic antenna. These are the antennas of our choice if we could get them. One of the other station operators. And here is the ship, the USNS Corpus Christi, which had a Mars station on board, anchored off of Lung Tau. The biggest problem was that their antenna for the what we call the rowboat, they're called being Alpha Bravo 8 Alpha Romeo. At the top of this mast is that antenna, the log periodic. The problem they had was the ship would sit there and turn on its anchor so that it continuously correct and not lose the phone patch when the ship turned on its anchor and the station faded out. Some of the operators that were on board, the fellow sitting at the console is Tim Stone, WB6YCQ, lives up in the LA area, and we finally made contact after about 50 years and haven't been able to see each other yet due to the viral concerns. So we'll have a meeting someday where we can safely meet, as I call it. At work one day, I ran into a fellow who was at Alpha Bravo 8 Alpha Bravo in Quy Nhon, Vietnam, where they had a major hospital. And one of the stations that we did run phone patches with, and the audio tapes that I'm going to play that you can hear of the soldiers calling home, these tapes were done by the husband of Lenore Jensen, W6NAZ, who was the radio operator at her station. And she, before she had passed away, had sent me these tapes, and I have culled out what I call the more poignant and ones of interest, as you know, some of the calls could be pretty mundane. I'm going to go ahead and play one of the tapes. The radio operators in the group will have more luck picking out. There is some static, there is some fading, but I think overall you'll be able to hear what's going on with these phone patches.
I wish I knew. They change every day. One day they're brown, and the next day they're gray, and the next day they're blue, and so you don't know. They say that your eyes never take a definite color until they're almost a year old. Over.
Well, she's giving you much trouble, dear. Over.
Oh, not now that I'm getting used to her. At first I let her give me a bad time, because every time she squeaked a little bit, I'd run and pick her up and stay up with her and all kinds of things like that. But you know, have to learn everything the hard way. Oh, okay. She just started to squeak. I thought she was going to cry for you, but I guess not. Over.
Well, I can give you another 100 days. I'll be home pretty soon. So you two be good now. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you real soon. Love you very much. Over.
Okay, don't worry. We'll be all right. You take care of yourself and come home real soon. Hey, you going to cry? Go ahead. Cry. Come on. Could you hear her? Over.
Yes, I did, dear. It sounds real nice. Over.
Yeah, that's about all she does.
Okay, so there you have a soldier hearing the cry of his newborn baby, and you could imagine how nice that was to have. So getting back to the Mars station, because we are in the secure compound, we are asked to leave the compound because they just can't have soldiers walking over there to make these phone calls. And so Jack Winning secured us another site to move the Mars station. And in the background, you see we've moved the cubicle quad antenna, and we've got it about halfway up this 60-foot pole that Jack secured for us. And we had some brave pole climber. I mean, we have been known to have a sniper from time to time. And of course, with our intelligence, we kind of knew when were more dangerous times than others. But about military intelligence, that's almost a joke. Anyway, a very brave guy to go work and help us get the antenna moved over. And here he is doing the final touches. This little line up at the top was a rope. We didn't have a motor to turn it, so we just used a rope to turn it the probably 15 to 30 degrees between the east and the west coast of the United States we ran our patches with. So now we have no building, so we get a temporary, what they call a Quonset hut made out of canvas. And we are actually not allowed to put a building up, and this is going to be more part of the story. In the background, along the ground, this gray part is I actually got the combat engineers to come and pour the foundation for a building, but we were not going to give permission. There was actually, you think you have problems with homeowners and covenants, conditions, and restrictions of putting in a ham station. We actually had a second lieutenant that used to drive around, and nothing was to be built on this base camp that was over 1 foot high without a permit and his permission. So Jack said, don't worry, we're going to work around this guy. We took this, we wanted to build a calling booth in the Mars stations. So this was a leftover bathroom door from the blown out buildings across the road from that Tet offensive. And what better to make a little calling booth that someone could sit in with privacy. I was given one radio operator to help me run the station. And he was from the combat engineers. He knew nothing about radio. He was a carpenter. And I trained him to do the radio, and his carpentry skills were about to come into play very handily. Okay, so here's our first station set up. We've got the Collins, we've got cards with people would give us phone numbers. They would just call in, and this would be Sergeant so-and-so, please call my wife, please call my son, please call my friend. And we'd line up the calls. You'll notice the fancy air conditioner to the left. And we also have the repair manual for the radio equipment always right there with us. Okay, so I'm now going to play you another audio patch here. And I think they're calling home around Christmas time of 1968.
Yes, I have a quick call for anyone in Vietnam. We accept the charge? Yes, I will. Thank you. Go ahead. Hello, I'm an amateur radio operator in California. Have you ever talked to the captain by amateur radio from Vietnam? And you've done this before. Remember, we have to stay over. Okay. Go ahead, Captain.
Hello, Charlie. Can you hear me all right, over?
Yes, Larry, I can reach you loud and clear. Over.
Right. I just wanted to call up on you and wish you a very Merry Christmas and tell you that I'll be with you next come Monday, over.
And the kids are right here, so I'll let them say hello before I say over, all right? Hello. Merry Christmas. Hello, Daddy. Merry Christmas. Hi. Merry Christmas. Over.
Merry Christmas to all you, honey. I love you very much, over.
Even the dog got in on that one. Anyway, there is a war going on, and just like your cat brings what it catches, we brought our catches to headquarters every time things were captured. These are weapons that were about to be used against us that were captured from the Viet Cong. And you can see landmines in the background, improvised, wire cutters down the bottom here to get through our concertina wire, machine guns, rocket launchers, even a captured radio. So anyway, the officers are there showing off their catch of the stuff that we stopped that were going to be used against us some other evening. This is a shot taken at 3 o'clock in the morning, lit up like daylight. The light is coming from parachute flares that are floating overhead. We are under attack one night, and I am at the Mars station. I decide I'm going to go out, and the attack seemed to be a little bit away from my part of the base camp, and with stupid bored soldiers do is they go out with cameras and take pictures. And anyway, I decided I would go to a nearby bunker and take a few shots. Now, if we had enough time, we would get the Cobra attack helicopters off the ground to help defend us. And you did not want to be on the receiving end of one of these with its 4,000 rounds a minute and 24 rockets. And glad that we didn't have, the enemy didn't have that stuff to use against us. So I climb on top of a bunker by the Mars station, and my reasoning is I did not want to be inside the bunker. In a previous attack where we had been overrun 3 times, where the enemy was inside our wires, and they actually got to one of the bunkers where my friend was, and my friends were in there, and a satchel charge, looks like a little mini suitcase, was thrown in right at their feet. They had all their lives flash in front of them. Luckily, it did not go off. And because of very limited visibility, I said, you know, I'm going to take my chances on top of the bunker. And while I'm here, I'll take a few pictures, because unless the enemy gets close, I've got nothing else to do. And if a round comes in and it lands outside on the ground of the bunker, I'm protected. If it lands on top of the bunker, I won't know it. It won't make any difference. So during this attack, what you're seeing here, the red lines going from left to right, is the actual helicopters flying by that I saw a minute ago. And these are the running lights. Down here, these red lines are actually minigun, machine gun tracers. The white splotches are rockets being fired. And as you're going to see, it just gets more lively and more lively as the attack goes on. And our perimeter is only, 500 feet away that this action is going on. That is the enemy out there. And it just gets even more and more intense until it builds to this moment. And I can guarantee you do not want to be on the receiving end of all that. That is thousands and thousands of rounds of bullets and rockets being fired. That's what the white splotches are. Now, if we really got in more trouble, we could call for an airstrike from what they call Puff the Magic Dragon. It was a AC-47, and it was equipped with these miniguns, each capable of, I think, 2,000 rounds per minute each. They could circle up above, and I heard that they could actually, if they were above a football field, they could put a bullet in every square foot. And as a test, they used to let a rabbit go in the middle of the field, and he never made it off the field. I think the animal protection people would not like to hear that, but it happened. This is a shot one night where they came and were supporting us, and they were overhead. And this is the spiraling down of these 6,000 rounds a minute down to the ground of what it looked like when one of those planes was firing. I again thought, I've been trying to look for a video of sound and what this looked like, and I have not found one yet, but maybe I will at some point. So I wanted to let you hear what it sounded like during one of these attacks. These are a little bit more modern time helicopters, but there's no difference in the explosions and the rounds of going off. So I'll give you a taste of what I heard on that bunker that night. Okay, let's see if I can get past the slide here. There we go. Okay, so, and unfortunately, after some of these attacks, we got people injured, and I'm going to play you a recording of a soldier calling home. He's in the hospital in Vietnam. His family knows he's been injured, but that's about it. They don't have a lot of details. And hopefully you can hear this well. Oh, and by the way, I want to mention, I didn't mention earlier, these were one-way phone calls. You couldn't interrupt each other, and I and the operator on the other end had to flip a switch. We listened for the word over, and both of us flipped the switch at the same time to send the direction of the call back and forth. So that's what when you hear the word over is all about.
Hello? Hello? Oh, that's fine. Have you talked before by radio to Bill in Vietnam? No, I haven't. Well, he's going to speak to you now from Key Non. Did you know he was in the hospital? Yes. All right. No. Oh, I'm so glad to talk to him. Yes, I know. Well, now, cry now before he gets on the phone. So you know. I'll probably. Oh, yeah, don't cry. Talk loud and very positive and make him happy. All right.
Hello, Mother. Myself, I'm in the hospital here. Want to talk to you a little bit about something you think to happen to me here. And thought I'd let you know, and they said that you do their best to get a hold of you. Over.
Well, how are you feeling? Over.
They got me messed up the last firefight I had, so I thought I'd call you and let you know. Over.
Well, how's your arm? Over.
Well, they're going to have to amputate it. Over.
Do you know what time, when you'll be home? Over.
No, they don't, not really. As soon as I can get a new arm put on, I guess, at another hospital in a couple months, maybe. Over.
Oh, we're all doing fine here, Billy. And everybody sends their love. Over.
Well, I send my love over.
I got your letter today where you said you were coming home. Over.
Well, I may not look like I did a lot left here, but I'll be home, though. Over.
I want you home, Billy, anyway, honey. I love you, and that's the way I want you home. Over.
Okay, I'll keep going, pressing on.
Bill? Well, I want you to remember now that we're all behind you. Over.
Well, I guess I'd better say bye-bye for now and give you all my love, so I guess that's it. Over.
Bye-bye, darling, and we love you. Over.
Bye-bye. Over.
Nelson, you did very well. I know that meant a lot to him. All right, now, bye. Bye. Hello?
She held up very well till the end of that call. Okay, so back to the Mars station. After these attacks, things can happen, and maybe you notice there's something missing in this photo right at the top of the mast. And that is what's left of my antenna after one of these attacks one night. So now I really got a problem, because you don't just call up your local ham store and get an antenna. So I find out that there are 50 of these beautiful high gain log periodics down near Saigon. The problem is, how do you get them? You don't call DHL, UPS. You got to somehow get this. And this antenna comes in a very large box, and it weighs about 300 pounds, and it's about 20 foot long. And I am at wit's end. I'm going to every aircraft that's landing and asking the pilots, hey, are you going to this, where these antennas are? Can you bring me? I've got 2 of these. They'll send me if we can get them. And they said, no, we only carry troops, mail, food, ammunition. We have to have orders to put anything on these aircraft. And again, I'm just going up to every pilot. What do you need? Can I get you a case of scotch? Trying to beg, barter. And finally, we get a helicopter pilot and talked to the guy. He says, hey, I think maybe you could sling this thing underneath the chopper in between the skids. Do you think you could get this? And he's willing to do it. But he says, hey, man, this is totally unauthorized. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll see what I could do, but you be on the radio when I'm carting this thing back and on the ground and get this thing unloaded before anybody important sees this, and we all get called on the carpet. And I said, okay. So we arrange a schedule, and I says, you give me a call when you're coming in. And I says, okay, hey, I see, he says, I'm on the way in. I said, no, I see a fixed wing aircraft. I said, he says, no, that's me. I said, no, I see a fixed wing. I don't see a helicopter. He says, well, that's me. And let's see if I can get out of this. Anyway, that is how the antennas got transported to a very quick-witted pilot. And believe me, we got that thing unloaded very quickly, so we didn't get in trouble. So I'm now going ahead and putting these antennas together with all kinds of missing parts and ill-fit parts. Had a few choice words for high gain at that time. I do manage to finally get it together. Now, the problem is I can't get it up. I don't have a winch and a pulley system on the 60-foot tower, so Jack goes and a 35-foot pole, which we did have a lift for. And I said, okay, any height will do. Let's get that one up and worry about the other one later. So we managed to get one of the antennas up. And then I built the second antenna, and we arranged for a helicopter to put it up. But the guy warns us that he doesn't know what this thing is going to do when he picks it up. If it tilts upward, it could hit his blade, or just be ready that he's going to drop it. And he says, okay, Sunday morning, not a lot of activity on the base. He said, I'm going to come over at 9 a.m. and put it up. Well, I'm laying after my shift in my bunk, because I'm working till 3 and 4 in the morning. I'm just about to wake up, and I hear this helicopter hovering nearby. I said, what is that? And apparently they didn't get a hold of me, so they decided to go on and put it up without me. And I run out of my bunk. I grabbed my camera. I didn't have time to focus it. I just pointed it, and I took a shot. And this is just as the helicopter, with that brave pole climber, dropped the antenna in to a special bracket that was made, and that's how we got the antenna back up at 60 feet. So now I have two beautiful log periodic antennas. I have one of the strongest signals, even though I only have a 500 watt and not a 1,000 watt amplifier in Vietnam. One of the stations that hears the US first, and I lose them last because we're sitting overlooking, shooting over water. And I'll go ahead and play you another foam patch here. Okay, so next, we decide, or Jack decides, we're going to get a building, a real building. Again, we have no authorization to put it in. We have no authorization for material. The material comes in. Jack is kind of bringing the material in as a civilian contractor, and says, all we have to do is get possession of the material. And possession was like 9/10 the law. So the material would come in on these LSTs during the day, and the material would be put down on the beach, down by our fuel storage tanks, and it would not be inventoried till the next day. So Jack said if we could obtain the material in a midnight requisition, as we used to call it, it's pretty much ours. So we then informed the guys on the bunkers up above, which are manned at night, that, hey, we're going to call into you this frequency. That is us down on the beach. That's not the enemy. Do not light us up. And we go ahead and ComShaw the material we need to build the Mars station. Now, the problem is, again, we're not allowed to build anything over 1 foot high. So I engage my radio operator, Mel, up here with the hat, and his combat engineers to build everything in pieces that are not over 1 foot high. Meanwhile, the lieutenant is driving by the road every day seeing this and says, hey, you are not putting up a building. No, sir, but it's not over 1 foot high. So I said, Jack, what are we going to do? He says, well, we build it, we prefab it. He will go away when he leaves the base camp. All we need is about a 3-day period. There's going to be a building when he comes back. Let me worry about it. I says, okay. So here's Mel and his crew. They have these pieces all prefabricated. The lieutenant's gone on some other business. And here's the building going together. And within 3 days, boom, there's some insulation we had gotten from one of the other buildings during the Tet attack, where we used to insulate the building. Again, all this ComShawed midnight requisition material, and voila, we now have a building. The lieutenant comes back, drives by, he is fit to be tied. The lieutenant threatens that he's coming by the next day with a bulldozer, and he's going to bulldoze the building down. I said, Jack, what are we going to do? He says, it's okay. We're going to have a talk with the 101st commanding officer. These are the guys in my unit. These are the airborne rangers and the long-range reconnaissance patrol guys that serve with us. He said, they're going to have a talk with the lieutenant. And, you know, in Vietnam, these are true stories. If a higher up gave you an unpleasant, incompetent command that might get some people killed, things like that, there were fragging events. So I didn't suggest anything, but I knew they were going to have a talk with the lieutenant. Now, you do try to resolve things peacefully. And since we're in an Asian culture, the lieutenant was offered a peace offering. And it was a pineapple. And the lieutenant was told that maybe the next time he hears or sees it, it may not be intact. We never heard from the lieutenant again. Mars station complete. You would walk in, if you couldn't get a phone line into the Mars station, walk up to the little order window and put in your orders for a phone patch to call home. Yours truly, sitting in a nice little booth. I made a make-believe telephone, not a real phone line, but I took a talk battery and hooked it up to a 500 desk set and made the soldier feel like he was actually calling home on a real telephone, even though it was just a little mic and a speaker handset. Mel did a great job of building us a beautiful console for our stations, a little workstation that we had, and a second station. We could actually have two frequencies if we could get them going at the same time, and two calls going at the same time. Now, let's get back to when I first went to Tucson to attend the University of Arizona before I was drafted. What does a ham do when he comes to town? The first thing you do is get to the local radio club. And at the local radio club in Tucson, I went and met a young guy. I was 18 years old. He was 16, and we became best friends. In fact, I pretty much lived at his house every weekend. He'd had a younger brother my age that had passed away of cystic fibrosis, and his mother literally adopted me as a half-brother. And you're wondering, what's the story with this guy? Well, some of you may have heard, but this guy happened to be the famous TV and movie comedian Gary Shandling. And how he ties in is we would not have enough frequencies. We used to have to share frequencies to run phone patches because we'd have 5 Mars stations, but we could only run a station above and below the 20-meter band, The other guys would have to stand by, and we thought this was ridiculous, and we couldn't get issued any new frequencies. So Gary and I decide and Gary tried to get permission to run phone patches to us, and they would not give him permission because he couldn't put 6 to 8 hours a day in. And we were begging if we could just get ham stations to put even 1 or 2 hours a day. So we got an idea to go find some frequency. We'd monitor it for weeks, and we wouldn't hear anything on it on the 15 and 20 meter band. And go ahead and just run phone patches. No phone call, no call signs. I was on during the day. We'd be calling out like a CQ for CONUS, Continental United States. Does anybody hear us? Want to run patches? And I'd hear, hey, Dennis, QSY. Boom, I'd move off, and me and Gary Shandling would run illegal phone patches. And then one of the other stations took on to this and heard us doing it, and they decided to do it. Unfortunately, they picked a frequency that, even though they didn't hear anything on for a few weeks, was being monitored. It was being monitored by the program to send the astronauts to the moon and back and to recover the capsule. And here's, I believe, the Ticonderoga, and here's an exercise. So on this 15 or 20 meter frequency, they were listening to us run phone patches on their frequency. That did not go over too well. We all got called in the carpet. We almost got our Mars stations shut down and taken away. And another interesting thing is you'll notice on the tail of this helicopter, for those that work DX and all, pilots, it says the word up. We were definitely on the wrong frequency. That's an inside joke for the experienced operators. Anyway, this is an article done on the internet about Gary Shandling's parents decide they're going to send us all Christmas packages, like 1,000 packages to all the troops. And they're collecting in Tucson, and radio station KTKT told them where to bring the packages and what to bring. And we then, at Christmas time, got all these packages distributed out in the field, and these were all flown in unauthorized. They took the packages to an Air Force base in Tucson, and some nice sergeant loadmaster put them on C-123s and got these into Vietnam for us. Anyway, these are the soldiers of the 101st Airborne out in the field during Christmas time, and you make Christmas where you can make it. And we got a chopper to go out, and we got, of course, a Santa. And Santa's out bringing out some nice Christmas presents to the guys in the 101st. Oh, and my friend Jerry Stabile from Chicago got to sit in Santa's lap, tell him what he wanted for Christmas. He asked to go to town and be with some of the gals, and of course his request was denied. And not to leave anybody out, we had a little present for the enemy, and it went over with great impact. Anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Shandling were given a nice certificate indoctrinating them into our unit from the colonel for doing what they did for our unit and the soldiers, the rest of the soldiers on the LZ. So I'm now back from Vietnam. This is between 1969 and 71. That is myself and Gary Shandling in his ham shack. We're trying to get to run phone patches. Again, they won't give us permission. We can't put enough hours on the air. And so we got to run a few, but not too many. We weren't really worried about what they were going to do about it. We just were worried about that later. Okay, so I then leave Tucson to move up to the Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona area, and I find out that Barry Goldwater, the U.S. Senator, is running a Air Force Mars station, and I get to volunteer to be one of the operators that can run phone patches back to Vietnam. This is Mike Wallace of the 60 Minutes show interviewing Goldwater back in a radio magazine back in the late 60s, early 70s. The Goldwater Radio Club was manned by about 30 operators. We kept his station on the air from 6 in the morning till midnight in 3 6-hour shifts. You see Goldwater very prominent here in the white shirt and slacks here. All the radio operators that volunteered. Yours truly back up here with the mustache. The station was phenomenal. This was a 80-foot tower with a huge log periodic, and you can see that the boom of the log periodic is actually a tower section. And I think this worked 6.5 to 30 megahertz. Also, Goldwater's ham antennas were above. If you look at the antenna on the bottom where my mouse is, that is one of our 300-pound, 30-foot log periodics. And you can see above that, there's a 20, a 40, and an 80-meter beam on this 120-foot rotating pole. And of course, we used that log periodic too for the foam patches. There was a 3-cabana suite off his pool at his residence, and we commandeered one of those to put the Mars station in. And above the door, there's 2 little white dots. Those are stars. He was a 2-star general in the Air Force, U.S. Air Force Reserve. We had 2 complete stations. It was nice because you could walk behind this paneling and do all the wiring, everything. 2 complete Collins S lines. This blue unit was a 5,000 watt amplifier that Goldwater had somehow requisitioned through the Air Force. So we ran 5,000 watts on 15, 20, and 30 meters to run our foam patches. And then we had the little pea shooter all the way over to the left. That was only the 2KW Collins 30S1. Yours truly sitting here at the console. We're just about over with the presentation here, just a few more slides. I'm going to play you a medley of some more foam patches here.
What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. Over.
I'm just doing my job and getting set. The end of this month, I kill a double-digit midget. 90 days. Over.
I love you, sweetheart. Everyone here says hi. Your mom and dad say hi. Over.
Hello, you too, and I hope everything is fine. 29 days is all is well.
Sounds so great to hear your voice. How have you been? Over.
I've been real good. Happy anniversary, darling. I'll be home in 29 days. That's all I can think about. I'm going crazy around here. Over.
Now don't go getting into any trouble when you have such a short time left. Over.
I won't get in any trouble. I promise. I'm just going to keep a cool head. Just lay low. Over.
Oh, it's so great to hear your voice, and you sound wonderful. Just wonderful. Over.
You need me to come home soon. Over.
What'd you say?
Over. You need me to come home soon. Over.
Do I want you to come home? Over.
Yes, over.
Yes. Over.
Be home in about 20 days. Over.
What? What'd you say? Over.
I said I'd be home in about 20 days. Over.
What? Are you kidding me?
Okay, I love you, over.
But I'm very worried about you. And I'm very scared. Over.
Okay, now don't worry about me.
I love you. Please be careful. Over. Yes, everything is fine. And you know what? You're coming home next month. Or does it so? Over.
Oh, man, this is just beautiful. I'm waiting to come home.
We're just waiting for your return. Okay? Over.
I love you. I shall be home in 58 days. Over.
Okay, we'll see you in 58 days. I love you too. And so long. California. Bye. Thank you. What are you doing?
Okay, so it is now 2013, and I decide I'm going to attend my first reunion with some of my companies in my unit in Indianapolis, Indiana. And here is Pat Junker, the fellow that got me into the Mars station, he happens to not live too far from Indianapolis, down near Louisville, Kentucky, and he comes and he attends the reunion. So that was neat to meet Pat almost 50 years later again. This is my colonel, we're going to see in a minute, then, who let me operate the Mars station and not get in trouble out in the field with a radio on my back. And he is now there with us at like 90 years old. And we asked him if he would present an award to Pat for supporting setting up the Mars station and let me come over, and the colonel, and Pat was given a certificate indoctrinating him into the 101st Airborne Division. And also a certificate. Unfortunately, Jack Winning, the civilian fellow, had passed away a year or two before. He actually did attend an earlier reunion, but the colonel had not been there. But the colonel then presented us with a certificate that we sent to his family, telling them that he was, in fact, part of the 101st Airborne Division. This is Gary Shandling, the comedian, sitting in Brentwood. We have lost him, Silent Key, due to a health issue. And just before he passed, I visited this Heathkit amplifier he and I bought back in 1967 or 8. It was still working. He had it in his home in Brentwood, California. Had a TS 950. It wasn't working. Over to the right was a Collins KWM 380, and I think a TS 440 on top. He had let his license lapse. I talked to him about we're going to get him retested and all this, but unfortunately Gary passed about 2 months later at only 66 years young. Very, very sad. So I want to dedicate this presentation to Gary, and also to Jack Winning, sitting here seated, both now silent keys. I think the most ironic part is that Jack had passed away due to some complications, and they were probably due to the Agent Orange that we'd all been poisoned with, and there was lots of it on our base camp. So with that, I know you guys, or maybe it's the guys in Australia, I don't want to offend anyone, they say cheers and beers. Well, we said it's Miller time. That is a pallet of 80 cases of beer. That's how we used to bring it in on the ships. And that is my presentation for this evening. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, Dennis, normally at the end of a presentation, I just say, oh, thanks very much, that was really interesting. I mean, it just doesn't seem enough now, because you're telling a real story there from the heart, from something you experienced. And, you know, and hearing those calls, you don't need anybody to explain how much that must have meant to mainly the wives, I guess, at home, and also to the troops, the people in the field. So thank you for now for sharing that. But of course, I'm hoping that there'll be other questions and comments as well for that. I mean, one of the things I wrote down, actually, which I thought was wonderful, was the operator, before the wife or girlfriend spoke to her partner, was saying, she said to her, don't cry, talk loud and make him happy. I really thought that was profound.
Yeah, Lenore was very good at calming. She's quite a lady. There's going to be a special done on her. She was a TV and movie star, by the way, and I got a call from a fellow that I think almost writing a book about her life. And in the spring, they're going to do a special, and I'll let you guys know, and maybe you guys could get in on this and hear more about her. She's quite a lady.
Yeah, I would love that. I'm sure to share with everybody. I can do that if you could let me have a link or something to it when it happens. That would be great, Dennis. We have got a few questions and comments already.
Okay.
And yeah, and obviously a lot of people already saying thank you and amazing story and things like that. But Firstly, from Roy Reed, who's G3SZIG, he says, I've got all those Collins units. They were the ones that you were showing at the beginning, plus many other Collins radios, and he still uses them as his main radios.
Yes, I am getting in 2 weeks a KWM-2A. I inherited a KWM-2, but I said, no, I want the real one like I had in Vietnam. And I just found one in really nice shape, and it's going to be shipped down to me. So I'm looking forward to having one back after 50-something years.
I bet. That's going to mean something else, isn't it, to you?
Oh, really? Yeah. And I'm putting the foam patch unit that comes with it on my mantle. So when people walk in the door and they go, what the heck is that? I'm going to say that's something that saved my life in Vietnam, if not my mental sanity, because it really, a lot of hams got out of harm's way by getting into the Mars station. Those were not assigned jobs. You had to get in, catch as catch can.
But and although it may not seem at first thought as something as, I would say, important as being on the front line fighting, you were really helping to keep the spirits up of the troops, of your colleagues, of the people who were on the front line. I mean, it was a really important job, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was sad when they didn't return. You knew something happened, and yeah, and then you heard their families. And if I can briefly, I had one fellow, and you tried not to get attached to anybody because they could be gone the next day. And this one sergeant would come in, career guy, flew a spotter plane. And he would come, it's funny, a war zone, he's got every Wednesday off, he would come in to call his wife. And I would allow him, he had 5 kids, I would allow him extra time. It was the sweetest call, it was like a soap opera. You could feel the love between these two people. And I said, oh my God, if I could marry a wife like that and these kids, I would give them extra. It was just like the call with the kids earlier, just like that. And I felt, I mean, I was really hooked into this, and unfortunately he didn't come back one time after, and sometimes he wouldn't show up, but when he didn't show up 3 weeks in a row, and I went, oh my God, and sure enough, he'd been killed in action. The plane had been shot down, and I thought about the widow, and I thought about the kids, and I actually contacted, later on, 25 years later, I found his wife. I was able to trade some email. I could never talk to her. It was very awkward because I was listening to your calls, but I just wanted to hear her voice again, and I tried to get her if she would just make a cassette tape or something saying anything. I don't care if she read the funnies, and I never could. But I did find out through her. Very sad that the 5 kids. 3 were from a first marriage and were taken away from her, never to be seen again by the ex-wife. Apparently, it was a lot of bad stuff going on, and she couldn't support 5 kids with no husband anymore, and they took the kids away, and she never heard from them again. And the other 2 kids did fine and went to college, but I mean, this thing bled right over into the, I mean, there's no way I could have known, and anyway, you can imagine it's devastating to do that follow-up, and I hope to hear good things. And ooh, you know, that one really hurt.
Oh. I've got a few more things I'd like to read you, but if you're been watching this at home and you'd like to put on any comments or questions for Dennis, then please do so. Paul G3VPT says, I remember in the 1960s listening to the phone patches system on his R1155 or 1155 receiver, so he remembers that. Stuart M0JKB says, what a fantastic and informative presentation. Thank you, Dennis. Question, would Mars stations have operated from the UK USAF bases looking for information regarding RAF or USAF Sculthorpe, which was an active base during the Cold War? There is a museum there, and the curator is very interested in anything that relates to USAF bases during this period.
Wow. I had to look in the book we had that I showed in the beginning to see if we did anything, information was gathered on that. I just don't have that information of what was done. They might have been running some traffic um, into Europe and into Germany, a lot of the troops there, U.S. troops. But yeah, that's something I'd have to research.
Well, okay. If you do manage to find anything, then let me know, and I'll put you in touch,
Sure.
and I'll talk to Stuart, and we'll make sure we can put you in touch with the person, the curator of that museum. Lots of us said wonderful comments for you. Honestly, I can't probably read them all out. And Paul 2E0 NXL says, that was really amazing, sir. You are a hero. The best talk I've seen. And yeah, this will be certainly memorable for me. I mean, we spoke several times in the last week, but you know, it's hearing the story is amazing. Other people watching, Roger G3LDI, who booked you. Great show, Dennis. Glad you didn't cut anything. Very poignant phone page. We did talk, just to tell everybody at home, we did talk about...
Yeah, I was afraid that nobody would know who Gary Shandling was. I was going to cut all that out.
Gary Shandling I certainly have heard of and things. But no, I mean, it was... You know, and I can tell you something as well. We get to see how many people are watching this, and we stream this to 2 places, Dennis. We've lost just a few, 2 or 3 people out of that, which is very, I have to say, on quite a long talk, a very unusual. We've been on the air for an hour and 3/4, so that's very unusual. A very poignant phone page is, where did all that S-line stuff end up? He said. This is what Roger said.
I wish I knew. I'm trying to find some of the operators who left, that were there in 1973 when we cleared out, but they slowly disbanded the stations, and I can never find out where exactly. We definitely didn't leave it for the enemy like we did in Afghanistan. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe nowadays, I suppose one thing, not everything is better now, and social media isn't always good, but at least it does allow people to find people sometimes on Facebook and things like that, doesn't it? It can allow you to find people, maybe.
Oh, yeah. I just got a call the other day from a fellow. I only spent 5 minutes with him. He came into the Mars station as I was leaving, and he was a combat lineman. Seen lots of action, been shot down in a helicopter, and he came into my station. He says, "Hey, I got a ham license. Could I get in here?" And I said, "Oh my God, I'm leaving like in a couple of weeks." And wow, let me see what I could do. And I didn't remember, but I went and talked to my colonel, and they got him pulled in for his last 3 or 4 months in country. He called me a few days ago and literally thanked me for saving his life, because a couple of his buddies were killed right after that. I mean, in his line outfit, it could have just as well been him. And he just found the Mars video, and he found me, and just a few days ago, I said, "This is unbelievable." He says, "Do you remember me?" I says, "I vaguely remember saying I'll try to help you." And then I remember spending 5 minutes as I was leaving with my bags, saying good luck to the guy. And we had a great chat, and we're going to reestablish contact again. That was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. You obviously talked about where you used the frequency. I think NASA or someone was using as well, where you got in a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
But I mean, wasn't this the sort of thing that generally, apart from when you were using frequencies like this as a ham, I presume you were using mainly ham frequencies, not military frequencies for this?
No, we were outside the ham band, above and below. We were not allowed on the ham bands with the traffic, and we didn't have enough allocated, and we didn't have enough operators in the States. We were begging for stateside operators, and this guy, this administrator, just was being, nasty about it, that no, they have to be on the air 6 or 8 hours a day, or we don't let them do it. And I really came up with part of a bad taste on the Mars program, and actually did not get back into it other than going to Goldwater's station while I was going to college at Arizona State near Phoenix. I did from 71 to 74, and of course 71 to 73 with Vietnam. But after that, I didn't want anything to do with, I couldn't have a station when I moved to San Diego to do that, and that guy would have been in charge of me, and I didn't want anything to do with him. And I basically walked away from Mars from that time.
You would like to have thought that, most people would have turned a blind eye to this, really, because of what it was doing. I mean, it was so important to keep morale up for these people on the front line, wasn't it?
Let me tell you, that sergeant, who was a career guy, and he could have got me killed. He wanted to get me assigned, and he was going to stick a radio on my back because he knew I knew a radio, and I had to keep away from him and keep in touch with the officers and people above him, you know, to do that. Do you know that at the end of my tour, he came. He actually climbed. I needed a repair to the antenna. He climbed that 60-foot pole. His MOS was he was a pole climber. And he actually said, you know, I was mean to you in the beginning, but now I saw the morale you did for the troops. I didn't think it was worth anything. I thought it was a waste of time. And he actually came and apologized to me and actually thanked me. So, yeah, I mean, finally they saw what it was worth, you know, for this morale booster.
Yeah. Must return with some comments. Stuart G4AFF says, I love my 305 or 30S1, is that a 30S1?
30S1. Yeah, the big amplifier. Yeah.
Right.
The one I couldn't have. I didn't have enough power.
That 5,000 watt one that you saw, the light blue one, was something else as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mike G4DYC says, great presentation, Dennis. Many thanks for all your service. 7-3. From Mike, and G4DYC. He's a Collins enthusiast and also the phone patch unit as well.
Yeah.
He asks as well, is Mars still active, and in what way?
They're connected with FEMA, I think now. The big, like the guys that are managing the Florida disaster, you know, with the hurricane, and yeah, I think they tied Mars into FEMA, but it's just a skeleton of what it was, and yeah, and like I say, I'm out of it. I just hear from some of them, but there's not playing a super huge role other than they have tied it into national emergency situations like what's going on now with the destruction in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're probably passing traffic, aiding and passing traffic, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's still a place for amateur radio in these sort of emergency situations. I mean, I and several colleagues are in Raynet. We're very, very rarely called on, of course, now with such modern communications, but occasionally it happens. We had a case a few years ago, it's only happened once for me for real, where flooding threatened to take out a telephone exchange on the coast, and of course if it had, then there would have been no infrastructure left for the mobile phones either. So yeah, very real. Roy G3ZIG, who I mentioned earlier, he said, please ask you to have a look at his QRZ page sometime. So it's G3ZIG. You might like to make a note of that.
Zulu, India, what's the last letter?
G3ZIG, Zulu, India, Golf.
Okay.
But I'll drop it on an email to you. I mean,
yeah, and by the way, anybody can reach me at my call letter, N6KI, November 6 Kilo, India, at arrl.net.
Okay.
And, you know, for follow up, that'll get to me. That'll always find me because it forwards. You know, I'm a life member of the ARRL. I should be a life member of RSGB. I got to tell you real quick that I didn't use mainly the ARRL handbook in Vietnam. I used the RSGB book.
Oh wow!
Which I found in Vietnam in a little somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I went to a base and there was a bookstore, and there was an RSGB. I don't know how it got there. It was like up above, somebody up above sent this thing down, and I was building some filters. I had some broadcast interference, and
was that the Radio Communications Handbook? Was that the big thick book that they publish every couple of years?
Remember, it was an RSGB book, like ARRL handbook, but RSGB.
Yeah, there is one. Yeah, they still do that.
In it and everything, and it's fantastic. I actually liked it better than the ARRL books.
Well, Dennis, everybody said lovely comments and things, and we've all enjoyed it. And although we've all seen films and read books and stories and things, to hear it from you, someone who was there, someone who can recall it in such detail and show us with the pictures and hearing the sounds of those calls, it's really brought it alive to all of us. And thank you very much for joining us. We're really honoured to have you give us this presentation.
To you, and I'm hoping more people could see it. And I guess this has been recorded, so
We are recording it, and we're going to put it up on YouTube. It's mainly for club members normally who just can't see it on the night. But I'll be very happy to send you the link so that
yeah.
you can.
Let's have a discussion though before you post it. There's a little caveat on posting,
Okay.
but we'll talk offline on that.
All
And
right.
I would very much appreciate that for those that couldn't see it here. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
that
not
would be
something that we post to reach thousands of people or anything like that. It's really just meant for
Yeah.
people who regularly watch us and who just can't watch it this evening.
Okay.
But I will talk to
You
you
know.
about that in the next day or so.
Great. Thank you, David.
All right. Well, many, many thanks, Dennis. Take care and have a great day.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.